At around 1:45 in the morning on the 3rd of January 2025, 4 trucks collided on the Hume Highway just north of Coolac, on the long dark stretch between Coolac and Jugiong in southern New South Wales. Emergency crews from Harden, Gundagai, Goulburn and Wagga Wagga were called out into the darkness, along with specialist rescue teams sent all the way from Sydney. 1 driver died at the scene. The other 3 were taken to hospital for treatment and mandatory testing. Northbound lanes stayed closed for the best part of a day while investigators worked to understand exactly how 4 heavy vehicles on a wide, modern, well-lit highway in the middle of what should have been a quiet country night ended up wrecked together in the dark. This was not some obscure back road. This was the Hume Highway, the single most important road in the country, the one straight line that carries Australia's 2 largest cities to each other. And it does this to people again and again. Stay with me, because this is the story of a road that looks, on paper and on the map, like one of the safest in the country, and of everything that makes that reputation almost beside the point. This is never drive from Melbourne to Sydney without watching this first. The Hume Highway runs for close to 880 kilometres between the 2 cities, a drive that takes most people somewhere between 8 and 9 hours if they do not stop for long, and it is used by millions of people every single year, commuters, backpackers, families on holiday, and an enormous constant river of interstate freight trucks moving day and night between Australia's 2 biggest economies. On paper, it should be one of the safer long drives in the country. Since the Holbrook bypass was completed in August 2013, the entire route from Sydney's outskirts to Melbourne's outskirts has been a fully duplicated 4-lane divided highway, the first interstate link in the country to reach that standard from end to end. There are no more single-lane sections where a driver has to gamble and overtake against oncoming traffic. There are wide shoulders, gentle curves, and clear sightlines for kilometre after kilometre. And yet the crashes keep happening, in strikingly different ways depending on which stretch of the road you happen to be on. At the Sydney end, the section of the highway running through Cassala and Campbelltown has recorded 7 deaths and more than 700 injuries in a recent multi-year period alone. And a nearby section between the South Western Motorway and Narellan Road was ranked the 3rd most dangerous stretch of road anywhere in the entire country by the national road safety body that assesses Australia's highways. Not far away, the stretch through Liverpool has been rated the single most dangerous road in Sydney for 6 years running, a place where heavy traffic, closely spaced intersections, and a low afternoon sun combine into something genuinely hazardous. Out in the countryside, the picture changes completely. In the Southern Highlands region southwest of Sydney, the 46-kilometre stretch between the towns of Berrima and Marylin has recorded 15 deaths over the past decade, 10 of them concentrated right around Marylin itself. Local police have found that speed was a contributing factor in roughly 40% of fatal crashes across that entire policing region, and the Hume Highway alone accounted for close to 1/3 of every single fatal crash recorded across the whole district, more than any other road under their watch. In a single recent year, officers in that same policing command issued more than 12,000 speeding infringements on their roads, and fewer than 100 of those went to heavy vehicle drivers, even though trucks make up such a large share of the traffic and are so often involved in the crashes that turn out fatal. This is the real strange shape of the danger here. It is not one single clean number, the way it might be for one famous killer road overseas. It is a highway that turns up near the top of almost every list you can build, for almost completely different reasons, depending on which 100 kilometres you happen to be driving through at the time. To understand why this particular road behaves this way, you have to go back to why it exists at all. In 1824, the explorers Hamilton Hume and William Hovell set out from near Sydney and pushed south overland all the way to Port Phillip Bay, near where Melbourne now stands, charting a route that would eventually become the spine of this entire highway. Convict labour later built long sections of what was proclaimed the Great Southern Road in 1858, including a stretch built by prisoners housed at the Taurang Stockade near Goulburn. The road was not officially sealed along its full length until 1940, and even then it remained for decades a narrow, twisting two-lane route through the middle of small country towns, the kind of road older Australians still remember with a mixture of nostalgia and genuine dread. Some of that early convict engineering is still in daily use today. Lennox Bridge, built over Prospect Creek in 1836, still carries traffic on the old route through Sydney's outskirts, and the Prince Alfred Bridge across the Murrumbidgee at Gundagai, opened in 1867 as the first iron truss road bridge ever built in New South Wales, remains standing more than a century and a half later. The route only became known by its familiar route number in the 1950s, once Australia's states adopted a national highway numbering system, giving the old Hume its modern identity as Route 31 alongside its name. Duplication funding began in 1974, and the project crept forward town by town and decade by decade through the busy approaches to Sydney in the 70s and 80s, then through Goulburn, Yass and Gundagai in the 80s and 90s, before the final major projects between Coolac and Albury were finished off, with the Hollowbrook bypass in 2013 closing the last gap and cutting roughly 3 hours off the total driving time between the two cities. Along the way, 26 separate town bypasses were built in New South Wales alone, pulling heavy trucks out of the main streets of places like Barima, Yass, Tarcutta and Gundagai, and quietly turning some of those once busy highway towns into much quieter places to visit than they were a generation ago. Picture the drive the way most people actually experience it today. Leaving Melbourne, you head north out along the Hume Freeway through Victoria, past Seymour, Euroa and Benalla, through increasingly flat, dry, open country where the paddocks stretch away toward a horizon that barely changes for tens of kilometres at a time. You cross the Murray River at Albury-Wodonga, the official border between the two states, and the road becomes the Hume Highway proper as you enter New South Wales. Not long after, you pass Holbrook, a small town famous for the full-size decommissioned Navy submarine now sitting almost surreally in a park in the middle of dry inland farmland. Further on lies Tarcutta, sitting almost exactly halfway between the two cities, a town whose local park now holds the National Truck Drivers Memorial, built in 1994 and dedicated to the memory of truck drivers killed while doing their jobs on Australia's roads. You continue past Gundagai, home to the famous dog on the Tucker Box Monument, unveiled in 1932 and drawn from a much older piece of bush folklore, standing near the same 1867 iron bridge over the Murrumbidgee, then through Yass before climbing gradually into the Southern Highlands, past Goulburn, home to the Big Merino, a giant concrete sheep built as a monument to the region's wool industry, then on through Marilyn and Barima, the exact stretch that keeps producing the highest concentration of deaths on the entire route, before the final run down into Sydney's rapidly growing southwestern suburbs around Campbelltown and Liverpool, where the danger shifts from empty highway to crowded intersection almost without warning. Somewhere in the long, flat middle sections of that drive through northern Victoria or the plains around the Riverina, your own brain starts working against you in exactly the way researchers describe on long straight highways everywhere in the world. The road runs dead straight for kilometre after kilometre. The scenery barely changes. Your eyes are open, your hands are on the wheel, and some essential part of your attention quietly checks out, drifting somewhere else entirely while the car keeps rolling along at 110 kilometres per hour. Drivers and researchers alike call this hypnosis, and on a road this straight and this familiar, it does not take much of it to turn a small lapse into a fatal one. On the afternoon of the 5th of September 2025, a man in his 30s fell asleep at the wheel on this exact stretch, just south of Marilan near the Marilan Creek crossing. His sedan rolled onto its roof in the southbound lane. He walked away without serious injury, but the road stayed heavily congested for hours while the wreck was cleared. And that same afternoon, only a few kilometres away near Goulburn, A second driver in his 50s drifted out of his own lane entirely, crossed into oncoming traffic, and rolled his car as well. 2 separate lapses of attention on the same stretch of highway on the very same day. Fatigue on this road is not an abstract statistic, it is written into the highway itself. Because this is also one of the busiest freight corridors in the entire country, moving a constant stream of goods between Australia's 2 largest cities, day and night, using heavy vehicles as long as B-double combinations that have been permitted on this route since 1986, with even higher mass limits allowed since 2006. Truck drivers doing back-to-back interstate runs are exactly the kind of driver most vulnerable to fatigue, and the road itself openly acknowledges this. The National Truck Drivers Memorial at Tarcutta exists precisely because so many of the people who move goods along this highway for a living have never made it to the other end. Unveiled in 1994 and later endorsed with a plaque by the country music legend Slim Dusty, it carries the names of truck drivers from right across the country who have died on the job, a permanent record standing at almost the exact midpoint of the drive. The New South Wales government has explicitly named driver fatigue as one of the 3 biggest contributors to fatal crashes on the state's roads, and in recent years it has spent millions of dollars upgrading rest stops at places like Kiamba Gap between Tarcutta and Holbrook, adding proper toilets, lighting and heavy vehicle parking specifically to give exhausted drivers somewhere safe to stop before the tiredness wins. It does not always work in time. In the early hours of the 30th of June this year, just after 5 a.m, one truck ran into the back of another at the Windmills rest area near Breadalbane, close to Goulburn, and the resulting fire engulfed 6 trucks in flames before it could be brought under control. A dawn-hour collision on a road built specifically to give tired drivers somewhere to stop. Barely 2 weeks later, on the morning of the 17th of July, in that same stretch near Breadalbane, a road train collided with the rear of a broken-down B-double truck whose driver had pulled over and put out warning signs. Both vehicles caught fire. The road train's driver died at the scene, and the highway was closed in both directions for hours, with traffic diverted through Canberra. 2 fatal or near-fatal truck fires within a fortnight, on the same few kilometres of road. Not every case here involves a truck at all. Back in 2017, on a July evening at Sutton Forest, 2 women in their 70s died when the sedan they were travelling in collided with a southbound semi-trailer, a crash investigated as a criminal matter from the outset, a reminder that this stretch of highway has been producing tragedies of every kind for far longer than any of these more recent headlines suggest. And fatigue is only one part of the picture. On the evening of the 20th of March this year near Marilan, a minivan collided with a truck and a utility vehicle on the Hume Highway. A 58-year-old woman travelling as a passenger died at the scene. The 36-year-old woman driving the van was flown to hospital in a critical condition. Another passenger was flown to a different hospital with serious injuries, and a third suffered minor injuries. The truck driver involved was later charged with dangerous driving occasioning death, along with several related offences. It is a sober reminder that on a road carrying this much freight, the size difference between an ordinary family vehicle and a fully loaded truck decides almost everything the moment something goes wrong. The countryside itself adds its own particular dangers. The Southern Highlands section around Marilan sits more than 600 metres above sea level, high enough that winter mornings regularly bring thick fog and hard frost to a road that, only an hour's drive away, can be sitting in warm sunshine. Local travel guides routinely warn drivers heading through this section in winter to expect fog and to start their day later rather than push through it in poor visibility. Further inland, the Riverina Plains and the dry country around the Murray swing hard the other way, into properly harsh, dry summer heat that puts real strain on tyres, engines and concentration alike over long, flat, featureless stretches. And then there is a danger this highway shares with almost every rural road in the country, and that a straight American desert interstate simply does not have to contend with in the same way: wildlife. Kangaroos and other native animals cross rural highways constantly at dawn and dusk, and collisions with them remain one of the leading causes of single vehicle crashes on country roads right across Australia, a genuine hazard for any driver who assumes an empty stretch of highway at last light is actually as empty as it looks. Zoom all the way out and the state-level numbers tell the same underlying story as the local ones. People living in regional New South Wales make up only about a third of the state's population, yet they account for roughly 2 out of every 3 road deaths recorded across the entire state. Speeding remains involved in around 40% of fatal crashes statewide. Drink and drug driving together are found in close to half of all fatal crashes, and fatigue continues to sit among the leading causes as well. Nationally, 2024 brought the highest road toll Australia has recorded in 15 years, and New South Wales alone accounted for 340 of those deaths. None of that is unique to this one highway. What is unique is that the Hume Highway is the single road where almost every one of those national risk factors — speed, fatigue, alcohol, wildlife, weather, and sheer freight volume — all overlap on the exact same strip of asphalt that thousands of ordinary families use every single week simply to visit relatives or get to a holiday on time. That is the real, uncomfortable truth sitting underneath the modern 4-lane surface. This road is not dangerous the way a twisting mountain pass or a crumbling dirt track is dangerous. It looks and mostly behaves like one of the safest long drives in the country, wide and smooth and clearly signed the entire way. That very safety is what lets a tired driver relax their grip a little too much on a long, straight run through Victoria. What lets a family push on through the Southern Highlands fog because the road ahead still looks perfectly clear. What lets a truck driver squeeze in one more run before finally pulling into a rest stop that might already be full. If you are ever the one making this drive, and at some point almost every Australian family eventually is, treat it with the seriousness its length and its record actually deserve. Plan an overnight stop rather than trying to push the whole distance in one sitting. Share the driving and swap every couple of hours long before real tiredness sets in. Take advantage of the free driver reviver coffee stops that run along this corridor during holiday periods, precisely because fatigue kills quietly and without warning. Slow right down through the Southern Highlands in winter fog. Be genuinely alert for wildlife at dawn and dusk on every rural stretch. And never assume that because the lanes ahead of you are wide, straight and empty, the road itself is looking out for you. It is not. It never has been. Come back to that night north of Coolac. In the first hours of 2025, 4 trucks and their drivers converging in the dark on a road built specifically to move freight safely between 2 great cities. One of those drivers never made it home. The road that connects Melbourne and Sydney is, by almost every honest measure available, one of the most heavily used, most heavily invested in, and genuinely safest looking highways in the entire country, and it still finds new ways to take people almost every single month. If this story changed the way you will approach that drive next time, please like and subscribe.